Welcome to another edition of Daily Airline News, focusing on the loss of Air India Flight 171. I'm Geoffrey Thomas, and delighted to say once again, joined by my co-host Richard Godfrey in Frankfurt. Good morning to you, Richard.
And good afternoon to you, Geoffrey.
Thank you. So, viewers, today's episode is burnout. Richard, we've had a large number of replies and questions, and perhaps just a few short ones to kick off today. From Chris Mighton, 5793. Geoffrey and Richard, absolutely fantastic series of talks. Your knowledge of the aircraft systems and history of events is remarkable. Keep up the good work. Craig Novi, 2090, says, yes, fascinating is the word, followed by incredible precision. High Tech Computers LLC. Great show, gents. Some really good facts and stats on this one. I worked with Life PO4 and other lithium batteries every day. They are getting safer, but there are definitely inherent risks for sure. Won't keep me from flying, but containment technology sounds like it's improving quite a bit. From Tiddles is my name, 4314, and my daily morning gents. This is one episode I've been waiting for, now to sit down and enjoy. So, Richard, there's some great comments there, and on the back of those comments, viewers, you'll see just below where Richard and I are, there's a new button called Join, and we're inviting you to join us. There's a series of special features, different grades, starting off with a trainee pilot, a first officer, then a captain. And you can support us doing all this research and support responsible journalism. So have a look, and if you feel inclined, love your support. Sorry. Now, Richard, we have ones that need replies. From Classic Roach, could the EE Bay battery vent to atmosphere have been the source of the smoke seen on takeoff?
Yeah, well, that's a very good question. And there are two main batteries. One is called the main battery in the forward EE bay, and that appears to have worked fine. And there was a dual engine shutdown, and the main battery took over until the RAT was deployed just after takeoff. And there's a second battery called the APU battery, and that's in the aft EE bay. That appears to have started to work, and the APU inlet door began opening at about 08:08:54 UTC, and that was consistent with the APU auto start logic. But the APU door, when found at the crash site, was not fully opened. The door was only at about half open, about 45 degrees. It normally opens completely to about 90 degrees. Now, we don't know what happened during the crash, and the door could have been half shut at some point by someone or some other impact reason. The smoke appears on the left-hand side of the aircraft just after takeoff. The main battery vent from the forward EE bay is on the right-hand side of the aircraft. However, the APU battery vent in the aft EE bay is on the left-hand side of the aircraft. So it is quite possible the smoke may have been from the APU battery. But it could be also a number of other possible reasons. So we don't know, but it's a very good question, Classical Roach.
It was a good question. So, Arnold Aaron, still don't get it. What would battery issues have to do with fuel control cutoff switches being moved? What connection does one have with the other? Please explain why these two are just ignoring the fuel switches constantly in every video. Am I missing something? Not denying battery toilet system issues, not questionable maintenance records of Air India, but what do those things have to do with this crash? The engines were shut down at rotation, plain and simple and very sad. Somebody please explain. Richard, you can explain that.
Yeah. Well, Arnold, we have discussed the fuel switches in 27 episodes. So, fuel switches are mentioned 14 times in our report, a plausible hypothesis. So, what you're missing is 27 episodes and reading our report. You say not denying battery toilet system issues, nor questionable maintenance record of Air India, but what do those things have to do with this crash? And you say the engines were shut down at rotation, plain and simple, very sad. So let me explain, but it's complicated. There are 10 points that I'd like to make, and there are 3 clues which you have to pay attention to. Number one, fuel switches to cut off engine one and then engine two was a deliberate crew action. It's not an automatic consequence of either brake drag on the runway or rat deployment or anything else that was going on. Number two, takeoff was at 08:08:39 UTC, and engine one fuel switch transitioned to cutoff, and that's recorded at 08:08:43, which is 4 seconds later. And engine two fuel switch transitioned to cutoff within a second of engine one, so at 08:08:44, say. So the first clue is the rat deployment commenced at 08:08:41 UTC, which signals an emergency situation with either the electrical or the hydraulic system or both. And this is 2 or 3 seconds before the fuel switches were moved. So, point 4. An emergency situation occurred before the fuel switches were moved. Point 5. Electrical faults do not command the fuel switches to move physically. They can only be manually moved. And we come to point 6, which is the second clue. Vmax of 180 knots is achieved at 08:08:42, according to the preliminary report, and that is before the fuel switches were cut off. Point 7. If the engine shutdown was due to fuel switches, then Vmax would have occurred after 08:08:44, at least 2 seconds later, if not several seconds beyond that, and because the engines do not go from full thrust to zero thrust and in 0 seconds. It takes a time for the residual thrust to wind down as the engine winds down. And there is a residual momentum from an aircraft weighing 213,401 kilos and traveling at 180 knots. The next point, point 8, the ADS-B data shows the aircraft was still climbing until 08:08:49, and that's 5 to 6 seconds after the fuel switches were moved to cutoff, although the airspeed will have been reducing as the engines spooled down. And that leads us to point 9, which is the third clue. The ADS-B transmissions stopped abruptly at 13:38:50.871 UTC. It takes around 10 seconds for the rat to come online electrically. So working backwards, 10 seconds from 13:38:50.871 UTC means the rat deployment started at around 13:38:40.871 UTC, which is around 2 seconds after takeoff and before the fuel switches. And that's my final point. The root cause is associated with an electrical failure, which occurred 2 seconds after takeoff, and not with the fuel switches, which occurred 4 to 5 seconds after the takeoff.
Yeah, well, that's a very good explanation, Richard. Robert Maynard, 7145. Thank you both for highlighting a serious problem, largely overlooked and unreported. For the last decade of my career, I worked for a major airline based in Southeast Asia. We, as an airline, forbid lithium ion batteries and power banks in checked baggage. We were one of the first to do so. Every passenger was asked to remove them at check-in, and at almost every gate we informed the owner their item had been found, removed, and confiscated. Enjoy the flight. Richard.
Yeah, well, thank you, Robert. And I agree with your airline policy. And I see that more and more airlines are adopting the same policy.
Yeah. At 41CV, gentlemen, another in-depth episode, and I have a problem with it. The intro says focusing on the loss of Air India Flight 171, but the episode talks then at length about various lithium battery fires in other aircraft incidents. Apart from the mention in the intro and the fact of how many lithium batteries are on board a 787, I'm struggling to see the relevance of these lithium batteries to the Air India crash. I thought that the dust had settled on the cause, being most likely to be water ingress from the toilet above into the rear EE bay, which caused electrical glitches. Whilst I have an immense regard for you both and your rigorous examination of the scant evidence provided by the AAIB of the crash and rich meticulous attention to detail, I have to say that several recent episodes headline the Air India crash, but the episodes have little, if anything, or any relevance. Is this simply clickbait? A more accurate title would have been Battery Issues or Lithium Battery Issues without inking the episode to AI 171. I would love to hear your comments on this. Richard, well, of course, lots of people have been asking about lithium batteries in the questions.
Yeah, and actually, 41CV, hundreds of viewers have linked the lithium batteries to the accident, and some are even saying it was the prime cause of the accident.
Mm.
So I think it's justified to take a look. So let me put a scenario to you. What if what was seen in the CCTV footage just after takeoff was smoke and not just dust? And what if that came from the APU battery in the aft EE bay through the vent on the left-hand side of the aircraft? And what if the APU battery showed a fire warning on the ICAS display in the cockpit? And what if at the same time water ingress into the aft EE bay caused another electrical fault with the main fuel pumps and causing both engines to shut down simultaneously? And the pilots would then be faced with a fire warning and dual engine shutdown. And you can imagine the Armageddon series of caution and warning messages that would come through on the ICAS display. The memory item standard procedure for a pilot, if there is an engine fire, is to switch the fuel switch to cutoff. The memory item standard procedure, if there is an engine shutdown, is to leave the fuel switch in run and let the FADEC run the relight sequence. If the FADEC relight sequence does not automatically succeed, and there was evidence in the preliminary report that it didn't succeed in at least one engine, you can force it to rerun the relight sequence by cycling the fuel switches. So my question back to you is, why are you certain that the APU lithium-ion battery in the aft EE bay has nothing to do with the smoke seen on the CCTV footage and nothing to do with the pilot action with the fuel switches?
Yes, Richard, that's a point well made. The model mechanic 3837, great job, gentlemen. always enjoy your work and passion for safety. When listening to battery-related passenger accident categories you listed, I remember a value jet crash in the Everglades also. I may be mistaken, but I think lithium batteries caught fire in the cargo hold. Is this correct? Great job and keep up the good work. Richard, do you want to answer that one?
I think you know the answer to that one, Geoffrey, better than I do.
Yes, in fact, Richard, this was our friend Greg Fife, who was an NTSB inspector at the time, and he did this crash. This actually was mislabeled and improperly stored chemical oxygen generators. They had been serviced, and they were being flown back to Atlanta on this value jet flight. And tragically, all 110 people on board were killed with the fire. So it wasn't lithium, but it had the same impact as lithium, a lithium thermal runaway fire, and the aeroplane was lost. And for those who are interested in this particular tragedy, there is a link below to details on that value jet flight 592. So, Richard, from Steve Parker, Hotel 4 Kilo, great work, guys. Do you know the next milestone date for the authorities to provide further updates to the public? Again, please answer, why would a pilot manually transition the fuel cutoff switches on critical stage of flight? No pilot is trained to do this. Any plausible explanation? Richard.
Wow. Steve, there it is. Firstly, your question about the next report. That's due latest 1 year after the accident, so latest 12th of June 2026. And to your second point, pilots are trained to move a fuel switch to cut off, and that is a memory item, standard procedure, in the event of a fire in that engine. So if they get a fire warning, the first thing they would do, move the fuel switch for that engine to cut off. And we're not saying that's the reason that there was any engine fire, because both engines restarted. So they must have been perfectly okay. And we are saying there might have been a fire warning, which was the APU a battery warning from the APU start that was underway. And maybe there was a mix-up. We talked about cognitive disorders and memory lapses, and even used the term brain fart. But this has happened on previous flights, and it may have happened again on this flight.
Hmm. So, Richard, I've got a very interesting question for you from Common Sense GRS. And on first look, this does make common sense, but I'm sure you'll have another explanation for it. The question is, not sure why you didn't mention the latest lithium battery tech now on the market. Been on the market now for many years and is far safer and just about has eliminated thermal runaway, and that is the LFP, lithium ion phosphate battery. This type of lithium battery is widely used in the caravan camping industry and now in many EVs. There are millions and millions of LFP batteries now in use, and very little, if any, thermal runaway incidents with this chemistry. Richard, can you answer this question? Why doesn't the airline industry use LFP batteries? They are extremely safe, can be charged to 100% without any safety problems, and have amazing lifespan if installed and used correctly, which an airline would do. Richard.
Well, thank you, Common Sense. Camper vans don't have to operate at minus 54 degrees centigrade. The aircraft don't use lithium iron phosphate batteries widely because they are heavier per unit of energy, have lower voltage, and perform poorly in cold temperatures. So you would have to heat the battery to keep it at its operating temperature. which makes it even more complicated to have a main battery or an APU battery. And even though they're much safer, the aviation industry prioritizes energy density and performance and compensates for the higher risks with containment and monitoring and cooling systems. So there are two ways to achieve the same goal. And it's fine. LFP is fine for camper vans, but not for aircraft. Well, at least not yet.
Mm. Now, on the same theme, Richard, Andy Beckett, 4480, he asks, Hi, gents. Over the past couple of years, I've seen several articles regarding the development of sodium ion batteries as an alternative to lithium ion. Would you have any idea whether this has progressed to a point where this technology might supplant lithium ion and whether there is any more or less hazardous?
Yeah, there is a huge amount of effort going on looking at a number of battery technologies. Most of them are still in the development stage, and it takes years before they're proven. And then it takes a while before they get certified for use in aircraft. And bear in mind the Boeing 787 or an Airbus A350, the design of these battery systems currently in use goes back about 13 years. The key driver in this new technology is to produce a battery with the power to weight ratio required, but without any hazard of thermal runaway. So we want a LFP type battery that can operate at all temperatures from minus 54 to plus 54 degrees centigrade. One of the most promising technologies is the silicon dominant lithium ion. So it has a silicon anode, but it's essentially a lithium ion battery. And that's the most promising near-term aviation battery technology for the combination we've specified, very high power to weight ratio and a very mature safety pathway. Uh, Companies like Amperius and Ion Blocks have silicon-rich cells delivering 4 to 500 watt hour per kilo energy. And they're integrated into e-aviation and HAPS platforms. For example, the Airbus Zephyr platform. Another company, Kuberg and Northvolt, have a 380 to 405 watt hour per kilo cells and aviation modules with passive propagation resistance, strong specific power, and improved safety versus conventional lithium ion. The temperature tolerance is improving, but it still needs preheat at extreme cold. Another company, QuantumScape, has shown operation to minus 30 degrees centigrade. And this is perhaps the best long-term path for safety and wider temperature margins, but aviation-grade charging down to minus 54 isn't there yet.
Yes, that's one of the things that we all tend to forget is the extremes in which aviation operates. And one of the tests they do on aeroplanes, as you know, Richard, is in the certification process is the cold soak. And they find the coldest place in the world they can, and the aeroplane's got to sit there for 24 hours and start up as though nothing's happened the next day. And so there's some very, very challenging tests that aircraft must pass before they're certified. So, Richard, here's a very interesting tale from Ak Noyer. He says, in 2012, I was flying on Emirates from Frankfurt to Auckland via Dubai and an Australian airport. I was bringing my commercial 8-rotor drone. The two LiPo batteries were under 100 watt hours each in individual safe bags carried in my hand luggage and presented at each station. This was in compliance with regulations at the time and Emirates conditions of carriage. This was accepted all the way to Auckland. On my return journey, after clearing New Zealand and Australian checks, Dubai security decided they were prohibited and should be confiscated. Since they were very expensive, I challenged this through several stages of escalation. In the end, a very friendly Emirates station assistant decided to help. He placed the safety bags in a large paper bag, accompanied me to the gate, and handed the bag to the crew. In Frankfurt, they appeared with other luggage on the carousel. I was a little surprised, to say the least, as it seemed that they had travelled in the luggage hold. Very clearly, there was a lack of understanding of the reasons for existing regulations. Richard.
Yeah, well, I have to sympathize. I've had the same kind of experience where you go to great lengths to find out exactly what the regulations are. I even printed it all out and took it with me to show any official on demand. And I still met officials who knew better than the regulations. And, if you're going to deny what the regulation states and you know better, then it's difficult to have that discussion with any official at any airport. And to my mind, it just points to the lack of training. And there are so many regulations, and you have to keep up to date with any changes in regulations. So there you go. You can successfully go all the way from Frankfurt to Auckland, and then on the way back in Dubai, you meet someone who's got a different view.
And that's a constant problem throughout the industry, but in these security situations. I find it constantly challenging with people not, the security people not understanding exactly what the regulations are. And of course, as an experienced traveller, you do know what they are. But the trouble is you can't challenge them, because if you challenge them, you then become a person of interest. So it can be extremely difficult situation to manage, and that is very confusing for passengers, as is of course the different scanning machines around the world. In some places you don't take your laptops out and all the other bits and pieces. In other places you do take them out. So it's very confusing for the average passenger and even the experienced passenger. Would you not agree?
Oh, absolutely. I've made 3,500 flights around the world, and the standards vary enormously.
They do. So, viewers, that's all we have time for today. Now we are not going to be here on Saturday and Sunday, but we are going to be back tomorrow with a very interesting episode. And I'm not going to tell you what it's all about, but it is really quite a curious episode related to Air India Flight 171. And I think you'll be very interested in that one. So please do tune in tomorrow for that one. But then Saturday and Sunday, we'll be taking a break and we'll be back on Monday. So Richard, thank you very much indeed for all your work. Really appreciate the answering these questions today.
You're very welcome.
And viewers, please subscribe to us, and also please join us. We would love your support with our new offering. And please like us. Please keep those wonderful comments coming, and keep those fabulous questions coming. And we look forward to your company tomorrow. Thank you.